Hello, it's Ryan again, and this is technically Ryan Rambles, but you know what? Don't even worry about the title. It's actually more of a promise, I think, really, because I want to speak directly to those of you that think that I might at any point forget about something and or talk about something even remotely recent. Haha! Wrong again! If you remember not too terribly long ago, it wasn't this very previous episode of Ryan Rambles, but I was doing what I came to call an episode run, and I chose Moon Knight as my topic because at some point, I had always liked Moon Knight, but I never really read any of the books, certainly with any regularity. So in seeing that Marvel was producing a Moon Knight show, this is back in 2022, and I had already been in the habit of anytime a new Marvel property was coming out, I would go back and kind of look up the source material and stuff like that. So I took it as a grand old excuse to do the same for Moon Knight, and then that just lasted years, right? Yeah, so let's say I released those episodes in 2023, this announcement came in 2022. Minimum 2 years of reading Moon Knight books. I'm not maybe a quick reader, but just enjoyed it immensely. Like I've read at this point at least 90%. I haven't kept up since I got to a certain, I did start the most recent book. I haven't kept up with it, but everything before that, I'm telling you, I have read 90+% of any Moon Knight appearance. Straight up. I found a doc online that listed them all out. I don't know if it's live. I don't know if he's kept that up either, but maybe I can still link that down below should anybody else decide to do that. But I did it all in the interest of watching the Moon Knight series, but also now in the interest of talking about every episode of the Moon Knight series. It's only 6 episodes, so I don't think we're going to be here for a very long time or anything, and I don't think these episodes themselves are going to last a very long time. I had a great time with the kind of preparatory episodes where I talk about all of those comics, some of my favorites, recommendations, honorable mentions. It's 2 episodes. Just go back a bit. You'll find they are video episodes as well, so you can see a lot of the actual art that I'm shouting out. Very proud of those. They take far too long to actually produce, so I don't know how many of those I will do, and I'm certainly not making these where I talk about the episodes video version. So this is just audio. That's all we're doing here. But finally, I sat down and fired up the Moon Knight series from 2022, and I did it with my wife and daughter. Watched it with me, so I don't have any of their opinions outright. I can tell you they liked it, and I can tell you I loved it. So maybe no surprise. Obviously, I've been a Moon Knight fan, and now it's like, if you're going to stick with a book and then watch the show, you might have some qualms about how the adaptation has gone, let's say. But for the most part, a fan's a fan, it feels like. And I'm even more understanding when it comes to adaptation. Like, I'm not the guy that's going to hate the movie because it's nothing like the book. I might have some qualms. I might have some questions that are like, well, why did they do this? Maybe, honestly, the biggest example of this is going to be still X-Men 3. Did that have like the actual, like the Brett Ratner X-Men 3? I feel like it had a subtitle that I'm forgetting, but like that's a bad movie all on its own. So really what I'm talking about still holds true. But I do remember having questions during that movie also about why they did that when a perfectly good and classic and well-regarded story already existed. But, you know, adaptation can be its own beast. But also that's a bad movie just all on its own. So I'm not the guy that's going to, if the movie that comes out is nothing like the book, but is still a good movie, I can still look at it on its own terms, I'm fine. I'm not going to make a big stink about it. So don't look for any of that. But I was on the lookout while watching this for any, obviously, similarities between the books. I didn't know like what parts of Moon Knight they were adapting. I am stoked to see that Doug Moench is credited as the creator of this show. I feel like he passed away. I don't know if that's a legacy credit or if he actually did have input into the current show. Maybe I should look that up. Doug Mensch is still alive. All apologies to Doug Mensch. I love your work. So that they would turn to him, this far down the line. I mean, he created Moon Knight in the 70s and get his input, brilliant. Like, one of the overarching themes of reading all of the books is that I could tell when Doug Mensch was not involved. And a lot of people did a lot of good work, especially later on with some of those Moon Knight books, but there was kind of a dark ages where Mensch left, and I don't know, and then he came back, and it was like, okay, here we go again. So love Doug Mensch. Hopefully they turned to him often during the creation of this. In fact, if I had to guess, I would say they did. There are some stark differences right off the bat. I wasn't positive we were starting off with the character of Stephen Grant, but I think I do remember hearing a lot. I remember Oscar Isaac talking about that. So I knew he was in here, but I don't think Stephen Grant at any point was British in the comics. But I think it's a brilliant touch, honestly, because Oscar Isaac can pull it off with the accent and all that, but it added more to the kind of big question of whether or not they were going to stick with the multiple personality thing. And there's obviously a lot of reasons why they wouldn't. It is kind of an outdated, both literary trope, but also just socially. Like, we don't, like, multiple personality disorder was, we use dissociative identity disorder, and even then, like, actual documented cases, and it's certainly nothing like you'll see in movies and TV have been, like, actually proven, or there's a comorbidity that can happen that it's like, it's the human mind is a complicated thing. But I think I'm getting both outside the scope and outside my, obviously, wheelhouse or depth of knowledge. What I am looking for are good old comic book references in this new show of mine. And the only two I really caught, besides obviously the name Stephen Grant is cool and accurate, when he leaves, he works in a gift shopist, I think is the actual term he uses for himself. Another thing that I don't remember from any of the comics. In fact, Stephen Grant was always the millionaire. Like, he was kind of the Batman stand-in. His identity was there from the beginning, but Marvel and different writers certainly leaned on him as kind of the Batman persona over time. That's always a problem, quote unquote, that Marvel's been trying to solve over the years. And Moon Knight filled that gap several times, in fact, I would say. But Stephen Grant was the millionaire, so he didn't work in a gift shop. He wasn't the everyman like he's basically played in this show. But at one point he goes outside and he speaks to, like, one of those, I'm going to call gold dudes, and not from like Richard Scarry or anything like that. Like, it's Goldbug, actually. Like one of the human statues, and he's painted all in gold or silver. This dude's in gold. Looking at him, I was like, well, that looks like Crawley, which was a person. So Moon Knight has had 3 identities. Jake Lockley was a cab driver, and Crawley was a homeless guy that would pal around with Jake or give him tips, had the street wisdom. So just looking at him, I was like, that guy looks like Crawley, and I think he called him Crawley at one point. I don't know how that's going to come back, which maybe I should have led with for this actual episode. It's all questions and no answers, like, except for maybe the final reveal there at the end. But it's not like what's going on because you see that. You just get am I going to spoil these? A really cool Moon Knight, in Moon Knight costume reveal. You don't really know how it all fits together necessarily. So keep that in mind. I don't know if Crawley's going to come back, if that's a thing, or if that's just an Easter egg and that's how it's going to stand. Also, when he's scrolling through his phone, because as he's trying to figure out what the heck is going on, he thinks he's blacking out. He knows something is happening because we begin the episode with him, like, chaining himself to his bed and setting up some number of devices to tell if he's actually leaving his place. But even when I saw that for the first time, I was like, well, the other dude's just going to put it back. Although now that seems strange, thinking about what Mark would do. So that means that when he was out as Mark, I'm already thinking about it too much. When he's scrolling through his phone, or a phone that he finds in his own rafters, to be like, what happened? He's missing some days. He doesn't know what's going on. He scrolls past the name Duchamp in the phone, which was his basically Moon Knight's Robin, so to speak. Now I'm doing it. Now I'm forcing Moon Knight into a Batman mold. Uh, he was his sidekick. Jean-Paul Duchamp was the guy that would like fly his helicopter and stuff like that. So again, don't know if he's ever going to show up in this show. I have remained remarkably unspoiled on this show, by the way. So if you already know everything about it, this can't be that interesting to you, but at least know that I have no idea. So those are the two things off the bat that I was like, okay, there might be some continuity here, but just the fact that they stuck with the multiple personalities was also kind of a huge question of mine. Whether or not they treat it, they could it's still a comic book adaptation. So I think there's still a chance they could treat multiple personality disorder like most comic books and most Moon Knight comics, to be honest, treated it, as kind of a gimmick, more or less, rather than an actual medical condition or at least not a superpower of sorts. Like there were some of those Moon Knight comics where it was like, I think it was part of the West Coast Avengers run, but like everybody else was under some sort of hypnosis or mind control. And because Moon Knight could switch to his alter, he became free and was able to save the day, which inventive, don't get me wrong. And I really like that West Coast Avengers run, but it doesn't, it's not really how it is. So still curious as to how they'll treat that overall. Also, they went with Bird Khonshu. When he appears, it's in the kind of a bird skull form, which, again, brilliant choice. Really, he didn't really have an identity before that. In fact, like literally kind of had a blank face before that as the moon god. So, there's again, in the West Coast Avengers run, they still go places with it. But whoever made that decision, that has fled my mind at this point for sure, to introduce Bird Khonshu. I think it was a smart move following up with it here. And certainly looks more menacing than the other iteration of Khonshu, which this is kind of like in those moments where he shows up, there are a few things they do to like ratchet up the menace of Khonshu. Visually, when he shows up, like he's huge, he's scary looking. Again, he's a skull. But also, and I didn't know this until after the fact, I glanced at the cast list and saw that F. Murray Abraham does the voice of Khonshu. So lots of good choices. But he's not the only A-lister, and I think it's fascinating. Marvel, like the main criticism that like I get, as much as I love all of it, I can get it, is kind of the homogenization that can go on with, the Marvel look, so to speak, or even just when Marvel was at its peak, which 2022 when this came out was probably a little bit on the wane. We're squarely in, gosh, I don't even remember what phase at this point, phase 4, but a bit of a, how does Deadpool put it? A bit of a downturn necessarily, which is fine. I'm still watching everything and I'm still loving a lot of stuff. And I've heard, in fact, newer stuff like, Agatha All Along is doing great, and that's kind of where I sit. I'm not going to go in with any preconceived notions that this is going to be good just because it's Marvel, but I can certainly enjoy something. I might not have any idea if this Moon Knight show is actually any good by the time I'm done watching it, because I can appreciate it for having read the books and stuff like that. That's fine. But also, the ongoing question is like, oh, when's this? Who's going to get gobbled up by Marvel next? So this particular show attracted A-listers like Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke, amongst others, and F. Murray Abraham. I think is pretty telling. And again, really smart, because I think the list of actors that could do what Oscar Isaac does, even in the first episode, you're going to need some range, number one, but also you need an actor that understands the property necessarily. And Oscar Isaac, he's a dude that's, he can do Star Wars, he can do Inside Llewyn Davis, which if you haven't watched and you don't have an aversion to swearing, I guess I should say, is a fantastic movie that he does wonderfully in. It's a Coen Brothers movie. So I'm feeling pretty good about the entire thing, people involved, the writing so far, the filmmaking, which I had forgotten that Benson and Moorhead were involved. And like I don't love everything they do, honestly. I've seen Endless, I've seen Synchronic. I think Endless is better. I think Synchronic had some writing issues that probably aren't worth talking about at this point. But I have zero complaints about their aesthetic. Like, I've never seen a film of theirs or any clip. I'm still looking forward to seeing Something in the Dirt someday. Looks fantastic. It all looks really, really good. I don't know how much they were able to touch this. I think it sounds like they came in later or just directed some episodes. I'm not sure. The showrunner is somebody completely different. It says it was created by Jeremy Slater. I'm unsure of who that is, but thank you. But I can see why they would have chosen Benson and Moorhead to lend their expertise to something like this, because it all is a little bit left of center, like their stuff, and looks fantastic for it. They do it in some really good ways. I mean, since we are dealing with multiple personality disorder, so to speak, and our protagonist is the one with the disorder, it's kind of a trick about how you're going to communicate that to the audience. I'm glad that they're erring on the side of confusion, honestly. At this point, I don't think anybody's going to get lost by the end of this episode. Again, just keeping it to this episode. But I can see why some traditional Marvel fans, or maybe more, like hopped on the bandwagon with as big as Marvel and the MCU got, might be like, oh, well, this is a weird one. I get that. I can see it. And so far, I guess I'm loving it, I guess is the review, or whatever this is, again, several years after the fact. But my family liked it too. Evelyn and Candy both very much enjoyed the first episode. We are all really all in so far. So not necessarily a lot to speak about, but just fantastic start. I'm totally into it. So that's going to be more or less what these Moon Knight Run episodes of Ryan Rambles are going to be like. So stick around. I'm not going to wait another 2 years at least to watch the next episode. So hopefully these will be a little bit more frequent, but otherwise you should have plenty to keep you busy on the channel itself over on YouTube. You're going to see, in fact, I apologize if you are mostly a podcast consumer of the Ryan Runs series of videos, podcasts, whatever, because there is a season 2 of Chasers that is up. I did post all of Chasers season 1 to the podcast feed because I thought I shared enough information about how those cards came up that it would still be interesting as a podcast, even if you couldn't see the cards. Still works better as a video, but these season 2 episodes where it's just Evelyn and I opening up packs of cards, I don't think work as a podcast really at all. So you will need to go to the YouTube channel to see those, even though I know there is a video component to Spotify and they are really pushing that. They are, since YouTube has kind of exploded as a podcasting platform, they are really fighting back. I just don't know if you want to comment on this one particularly, if you want to find me anywhere, in fact, I'm Facebook, Twitter, Threads, and I just launched my Blue Sky like 30 minutes ago. So you can find me. If you want to tell me that those episodes would fit on the Spotify podcast feed, I will happily put them there. And it'll really only take one person. So if you're that person, go to it. But otherwise, you're going to see a new episode, and this is on the podcast feed, of Cinematic every Friday at 8. And back on the channel, I am live every Tuesday at 10 with a new Tetris, but also a little bit about where that Tetris came from and what I had to do to get it up and running on the stream, probably. So lots of stuff going on, and it'll be far more regular and scheduled out than it has ever been. So if you can take a part in that at all, I welcome you and I thank you. If you're next level, you're going to look for patreon.com/Ryan_runs_ or the PayPal link that's probably also not too far from where you're at right now. So thank you as always, regardless, and we'll see you next time.